Hamilton from Audible Elegance of Cincinnati, Ohio. Please do subscribe to our channel. It helps us improve things as we go. We have a website, audibleelegance.com. We have an online store where you can buy new and used gear. If you have a local dealer of the products we sell, please buy from them. We like to see more dealers in the marketplace so people can hear things more and more rather than relying upon paper reviews. We do work on Facebook, Instagram, and X. Today's topic is a little odd. I talked about it many years ago with the newspapers. And that is, what do you do with electronics when there's flood damage or it gets very wet? And in many cases, the flood damage can be so severe to a product that, or not worthy of an attempt to resurrect it, that trash and an insurance claim is where you go. But if you don't have flood insurance and it's something you prized, what do you do next? And it depends upon the product and whether or not power was going to the unit at the time the water damage or flood damage occurred. This is a little tricky also with, let's say, laptops and computers, because oftentimes they have battery systems in there which may defeat the attempt to try to resurrect the product. Many years ago, I was given probably 50 or 60 Macintosh laptop computers that suffered quite a bit of water damage. And I managed to resurrect about 30 of them. Some of them were beyond. Of course, at that time, they also had floppy drives in them, so it gives you an idea of the age. But floppy drives are very sensitive to that sort of stuff. But first and foremost, you got to make sure that the unit was not powered at the moment that the water damage occurred. And if you have the product and water's pouring out of it, don't turn it on. That's rule number one. The minute you turn it on, you're going to toast shit. You certainly want to leave it completely unpowered. And depending upon what it is, give it many days to dry out. If you can open it up and put fans to it, do it. But certainly you've got to let the unit dry out first and foremost. Next step is to try to figure out what you've got, and it depends upon the type of damage you've suffered. Obviously, my parents had a house that was inundated by seawater when a hurricane hit them, so they got hit by the surge. Salt can play havoc on a lot of stuff very quickly and very badly. If you're in a situation where flood where it included mud and everything else, I'll give you an idea to try, but I can't guarantee any success, particularly if you got mechanical parts where the mud can get into it. But the first step is in all cases, is to dry it out and see what you have. The longer you leave water in there, the more potential it has for damaging things. One of the first steps you can try at that point is flushing it. If you flush it with any sort of pressurized water, keep in mind that water usually contains minerals, and that's not an ideal thing to leave in there. So if you use, common household water, as I would call it, however it's applied to flush out whatever is in there, you need to follow it with distilled water, and to make sure you're not leaving any mineral content and such in there. And certainly after that, again, let it fully dry out. The minute you're confident that it's fully dried out, depending upon what it is, you may attempt to start on that. It's certainly easier on things like power amplifiers and such, because typically there's not many moving parts in those. usually just the power switch actually, and to at least see what's going on. You might apply a variac at that point on your startup to make sure that you're not going to wind up with a spectacular show. Certainly if you have vacuum tube electronics, you got to keep in mind that all of those tube sockets and everything else are going to be contaminated and a mess. If it's irreplaceable, you may try some of the tricks. At the time I was doing the Macintosh laptops, I was also able to get a hold of a chemical cleaner. It was actually citrus based. It was no longer available. It's considered hazardous to your kidneys. But that proved to be very, very effective in helping me clean up board traces and everything else. So there may be other things out there that you can flush it with chemically after you do the flush with distilled water. Keep in mind that if you use a chemical flush, you have to be very careful about many parts that may be surface mounted, because usually underneath of them may be a silicone heat transfer or other chemicals meant to transfer heat, and if you use a flush on them, you basically may well have flushed that out, and the minute you turn the product on, what is attached is going to get heat stressed. So that's not ideal. So chemicals around output transistors, let's say on an amplifier, I'd be very careful about doing that, because that's where the chemicals can take away the compounds. I'd be careful about that. If you're in any doubt as to whether you should even try to resurrect it, you can certainly take it to a service shop. Please understand that no service shop is going to guarantee the results, because everything now is at risk of failing one part or another. And that's the way it goes. If you have speaker damage or water damage on speakers, it's pretty much over. If the drivers aren't wrecked, certainly the cabinets are destroyed. And I'm sorry to say, I basically would give up on those pretty quickly. And we're not talking about people putting their beer and drink cup stains on the top. We're talking about where the wood has expanded, because that usually blows the joints apart internally anyway. Not to mention that something like that internally could also mold, and mold is not a good thing in the home. No, you don't want that. Anything that has an LCD screen or display, that's a toss-up. It may be fine, they may be not. You won't know until you fire the thing up. And but be very careful about when you do fire anything up that's been exposed such way. Personally, I would recommend turning them on outside of the house, just in case there's a fire or there's unexpected sparks. You just trying to save a piece of equipment by burning your house down is not exactly an equal balance of decisions. So when I've had to deal with things that have been exposed, I do personally fire them up outside. And as I say, I wait for the light show, and that can happen. So those are basically some of the things that I've experienced and have had to do when it comes to flood damage and such. If you have flood insurance and your insurance policy will cover flood damage, well, that's part one. Keep in mind though, when you have expensive gear, expensive audio or expensive video systems, that many insurance policies will require you to have declared them as additionally insured things. Household policies are looking at washers and dryers and toasters, things like that. They're not looking at $5,000 power amplifiers. And so there have been some cases where people have suffered damage one way or another, that we tried to help them out, and the insurance company says, well, this is great you're involved, but it isn't insured. And lo and behold, when you look at the policy, unless it was declared, it's not. So if you have things that are unique, antiques and that sort of stuff, I'm sure they go into the same class. Make sure they're covered by that policy, or that a rider is added to the policy that specifically covers those items as well. So that's my take on flood damage. I'm really sorry that people have had to go through this, but right now we're watching stories all over the country, and I have a couple of customers up in Connersville, Indiana, and I've seen what's happened to those folks, and it's heartbreaking, but it does happen.